Well, I think this is an awesome crowd. You're such a lovely audience. I'd like to take you home. We're going to launch into this. If a few people come straggling in, that's not a problem. It is really cool to see this many people that are not surprisingly interested in challenges, trends, and important developments in higher education technology, because that's kind of what we're about here. My name is Larry Miller. I go by Lawrence G. Miller because there's a lot of Larry Millers out there. And I am the Senior Director for Community College Relations. Do we have community college people here? All of you. Thank you. And in that role, I try to work with the community colleges. I've only been on board really a few months, but I've been with the NMC in one way or another for many years. How many of you know about Horizon reports? Wait a minute, I need to take a picture here. All right, how many of you know about Horizon reports? Raise your hands real big. Great, okay. I'm sending that back because that's good news. How many of you know about the New Media Consortium, NMC? Is it the same ones? Because a lot of times people, I'll ask them, do you know about the NMC? And Horizon Report? Oh, yeah. So the NMC is the Horizon Report. And really, I want you to think about this. Don't think about Horizon Report, think about Horizon Project. Because the report or reports are just, kind of a place in time, whereas the project is an ongoing thing. So my good friend Larry Johnson, who is the Chief Executive Officer and President of the New Media Consortium, says the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So, what the project does is try to even that out a little bit by finding things that are of significance and putting them into a not just a document, but an entire system of knowledge that's of great interest to many people. So the Horizon Project actually started in 2002, and Larry Johnson had only been with the NMC a little bit, and I was on the board of directors of the NMC at that time. So that was my initial involvement with the NMC, was a board member. And Larry came up with this idea of creating a panel that would look out there and find technologies that were going to be coming in to the educational learning spaces, in particular higher education, because that's really what we were about at that time, was higher education. So that started in 2002. It actually took us a couple of years to figure out what the heck we were doing and come out with the first Horizon Report in 2004. So there have been 12 editions of the NMC Higher Education report. About 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, we came out with a museum edition of Horizon Report. One of the things about the NMC that I love, and I think it's a little unique in this sense, is that it is an organization that started in higher education, started in educational technology, but has actually embraced other learning space. And the museums were integrated into the NMC over 10 years ago, and more recently K-12 education. So now we have a Horizon Report for K-12 education. There's been 2 editions of that. There are also other kinds of output, and these are sometimes called technology, well, they're called Technology Outlook. So this one is one that came out in 2013. It was for 2-year institutions, and I was the co-principal investigator of this project with Larry Johnson. We also did a STEM in 2003 too. So this is something we'll probably be doing more of, is some particular sector, and if it's of interest and we have the funding to do it, we'll look at that. There are also regional technology outlooks, and there's a bunch of them. There's Norway, and there's Latin America, and Australia, and so forth. Right now, there's one underway in Europe, sponsored by the Europe Commission, Economic Commission, and it will result in a publication that will come out in 27 different languages, which is just pretty amazing, really. All of the material that is produced through the Horizon Project is freely available. It's all Creative Commons type stuff, so it's out there on the NMC website for downloads. I'm told that there are nearly 7 million downloads of NMC material, which is pretty astounding. So there have been 38 editions. The print run isn't the most important thing, but it is a thing that some people like. You know, you touch it. It's kind of nice. But the content is extremely useful in its digital format. And so here is a map, and you know, to be honest, I'm not really sure what the time frame was on this, but I think it was like a month in 2013. And the little things on the map there represent a download. So as you can see, North America, Europe, pretty heavy, but it's very interesting to see that we are actually of influence all over the world. And another unique thing about the NMC, in addition to the embracing of the other space, is the fact that it's an extremely international organization. So the technology outlooks for these different regional areas have really helped on that. But we have expertise that comes into the NMC from all over the world, and that's useful to all of us. So I told you my involvement started in 2002, and then I was involved with the 2-year report that came out in 2013 as a co-PI. So I want to tell you a little bit about the process before we get to the specifics about the NMC 2014 Higher Education Edition. That, like most all of our work, has to be done with funding, and we often partner with other significant organizations. So in the case of the higher ed, we've had a partnership with EDUCAUSE and the ELI, and that's headed by Dr. Malcolm Brown. And Malcolm and Larry Johnson have been the co-PIs for the higher ed edition for a couple of years now. The World Bank was the funding agency that helped us to make this happen, because it's not something that happens without a little bit of cost. Well, okay, in the Horizon Project, what are we looking at? Well, there's a lot to look at. Just look around you. Learning technologies are out there, so are consumer. And we have to look at the consumer side, and we have to look at the strategies that we're using for employing the technologies in our educational setting. Social media, a lot of stuff with that. Various internet technologies, the cloud and so forth, and visualization as well. So then you add on top of that enabling technologies. There's a lot to look at. And one of the things that the project does is it gathers this information and makes it available. And we have staff people, and we have NMC member organizations that have individuals at their institutions that are very helpful in getting this stuff together. So what's the process? The process starts with the lens of outcomes. We really want to make the information useful, and we like it to be considered in 3 ways. Our research can help in terms of informing policy and providing leaders with the kind of information that they need. Oftentimes, and you all are leaders, And if you have that situation where you have you want to bring some technology into your institution to make a difference in teaching and learning, if you bring in information from the Horizon Report that says, look at what these other people are doing, and we need to be doing this. I've talked to a bunch of people at this conference, and they say that's exactly what they're doing with the Horizon Report. And so that's really a good thing. But above all, I think the NMC as an organization is an organization of practitioners. And many of the people that come like to our summer conference are not just the CIOs and the higher level folks at colleges and universities, but they're the young people, and it's very exciting, frankly. How many people have ever gone to an NMC summer conference? A few of them. I just really enjoy it a lot, and it's very useful. So we're looking at these timelines, and we like to say that the time on the first, the fast track is really, it's here, it's now. And a lot of times we're kind of stating the obvious, but sometimes that's an important thing to do, particularly if there's research to back it up. Then we have what I call the degrees of difficulty. And this is a different way of looking at things, because in the old days we used to just say, here are technologies that are out there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, you know, you could do something with it or not. I think this whole new way of doing our Horizon project and our outputs in terms of challenges, I think is really significant. So we have solvable challenges, difficult challenges, and wicked challenges. The process works by creating an advisory board for each project. So that would consist of typically about 40 to 50 people. And these are subject matter experts. And like in the higher education realm, most of the people are within the higher education environment, but we also have people from museums and K-12 that are involved in that, because there's some really important cross-pollination. We have the international aspect as well that plays into it. But I want to encourage all of you to think about possibly being on a Horizon project panel. And you can do that. You can self-nominate yourself. There's a form on the website, nmc.org. And if you go there and fill out that form, we know that you're interested. We would be looking at do you, as an individual, appropriately fit into this project? And if so, you would probably get on it. So it's a pretty cool thing to do. It's a bit of work. It's not overwhelming, but it's something you have to pay attention to. It moves very quickly. And it's all done on a wiki. So over the years, the NMC has developed this wiki space, and it's really powerful now. And basically the work is done on sort of a Delphi kind of principle, where people are essentially voting or affixing their wiki signature to different aspects of it, so we know where the weight is. And then we can go through and say, you know, a lot of people are interested in this, and then we can do some further iterations, and that's how it works. So down at the bottom of this slide, you can see there are these check marks, and if there's a project ongoing, then you can see at what stage the project is. This one says we're all done because it's the one for the 2014 Higher Education Edition. Now, what's interesting is that the wiki is out there where you can look at it. So it is entirely possible to go back through these things and kind of dive down into it and say, wow, you know, they did talk about that, but not enough people thought it was important to put it into this time frame or something along those lines. but it is a wiki collaborative, and it's obviously totally done online. So before you actually start the work, then the staff, the NMC staff, will pre-populate some of the content out there, so you have something to work with. But then once the panel gets going on it, they're adding content, and by content I mean maybe a research study, maybe a report, maybe an article in some journal or something like that contributes to the discussion along those lines. So we're looking at those emerging technologies and things like that. We have like technology watch lists that we look at, various reports, some stuff just out of popular culture media, and we just try to glean all of that, and that's why it's an organic process. That's why it's not just the published thing. So let's get into some of the things that are actually in this this 2014 Horizon Report. This is the only one I have that's a printed version of it. I do have a couple of these technology outlooks for the community colleges, so if there's any community college people that would like these afterwards, I can give you. Again, it is downloadable. One of the things I find with the PDF version is I go in and I can copy out like a paragraph and put it into something, and it makes it pretty handy that way. But, so in our fast, these are the trends. Okay, we have trends and we have challenges, and then we have developments. Okay, so the trends are, this is the part where it's kind of like restating the obvious. So we all acknowledge that social media is everywhere. And we also would all agree that there's a lot of changes going on in online learning with hybrids and collaborative learning and flipped classrooms and those kinds of things. So the went the wrong way. The mid-range is going to be the rise of data-driven learning assessments, and of course we heard yesterday about big data. We know data is important. I think this is a very significant trend, the last one there, where students, and I think this is a bit of the millennial generation characteristic, are much more interested in being creators. They're not just passive consumers. When they show up in your classrooms, they don't necessarily want to just be lectured to, although a good lecture is a good lecture. But it is a generation that creating content themselves is very important. So in the long range trend, and this would be like in the 5 years, and let's be honest, it's pretty hard to really look out there 5 years, but agile approaches to change, that's not really a technology issue, that's a cultural issue. If you're at an institution that's agile, and actually at a CT forum a year ago I did a presentation about community colleges being the gazelles, being the agile ones, because I really believe community colleges are great places where educational technology gets into the teaching and learning environment pretty quickly. So, and then again we have, as a long-range trend, the evolution of online learning. Well, yeah, we had that on the near and we had that on the far. What does that mean? Online learning is really important, you know. So now let's look at the challenges. Excuse me, I woke up this morning with an incredibly sore throat and I'm kind of struggling a little, but solvable challenges are actually ones, we can do this. Doesn't mean we have done it, but these are pretty simple to do in some respects. The first one is the digital fluency of faculty. I personally believe that over time that's going to take care of itself, but it's not entirely an age thing. When I was the chief academic officer at Snead State Community College in Alabama, I had 3 or 4 faculty that are basically my age who were the real champions. They were the ones that would very quickly try out new things and really did a fine job of developing educational technology that worked. So the other, a relative lack of rewards for teaching, and I think whether you are a teacher or whether you are in another position at a university, we all recognize that most faculty are probably not compensated, not just financially, but in terms of recognition and things like that. So those are solvable. More difficult would be those that we know pretty much how to do it, but for various reasons, the solutions aren't clicking in. Right now, I think there's a tremendous pressure, and it's primarily coming from for-profit higher education. And of course, a lot of for-profits are under tremendous scrutiny. A few of them are crashing and burning right in front of our eyes. But we must recognize that when the University of Phoenix has 200 and whatever thousand students, they must be doing something right. And you know, I think they are changing things. I think we have now in higher education a lot of not-for-profit organizations that are acting as if they were for-profit. And Western Governors University, for example, is a not-for-profit, but the way they set up their educational programs is you know, kind of different from the traditional school. So I think this competition is really a critical issue for us. Scaling teaching and technology innovation, and that would be where you've got the faculty member and maybe she's doing something really awesome in her class and you'd like to see that grow. Well, how do you scale that up to a departmental level or to a college and university level? That's a challenge. Now, wicked challenges, and this is a concept that Malcolm Brown brought to the NMC a couple of years ago. One of the things that the NMC did, and they do this periodically, is they do kind of a overall check on what they're doing. So we had this conference in Bastrop, Texas, at a really nice conference center down there, and we brought 100 people who had been involved in the Horizon Report, and we just kind of looked at what we were doing and where we were going and that kind of thing. And you know, it's an important check when you get the validity of a group of practitioners and research people with great repute and reputation saying, you know, you're doing this stuff pretty well. So wicked challenges, Malcolm said, would not even necessarily be definable. They're that complex and that vexing. Expanding access, always a problem. I think this last one, keeping education relevant. And I think some of that is the challenges that we get by popular culture, because we look at you know, people in sports or people in entertainment who are wildly successful, but their path was not graduating from a 4-year institution. And you can look at some of the real giants of technology, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. They never graduated from a college or a university. So keeping education relevant is a wicked problem. Let's look now at this is what used to be the old way of presenting information in a Horizon report. Was we would have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know, it's still useful to do this part of it. I think I went the wrong way again. So in the early Adoptive Horizon, 1 year or less, in other words now, we're saying, our panel is saying that flipped classrooms and learning analytics, the big data thing, are upon us and increasingly significant. And there are some examples in the actual document of some institutions that are doing these things at a very high level. So that is one of the things that you get from the Horizon Project, is you can find some institutions maybe like yours that are doing the stuff that you want to do. You can contact them, reach out to them, and that's a good way to get it. So in the 2 to 3 Adoptive Horizon, here's 3D printing. Well, 3D printing's been there in many ways for a long time. In fact, in the 2004 first edition of the Horizon Report, we identified 3D printing as being an out there kind of thing that was going to happen. I think we used the term rapid prototyping, which is not exactly what 3D printing has become, but it can be used that way. But 2004 we were saying 3D printing's important, and it's still important. The other one that we've had in Horizon reports for a while is the use of games and gamification as part of learning experience. It is experiential learning to play a game. It's a powerful learning tool, and we think that is something we ought to be into and keeping an eye on. And then let's see, 4 to 5 years out, we have a term called quantified self. I'm not too sure that term has stickiness for me, but what it really means is if you're wearing a Fitband, okay, and the Fitband is telling you that you got a good night's sleep. Well, there's ways that we can take that kind of wearable technology and weave it into teaching and learning. We're just not really sure how that's going to manifest itself, but we think it's important. Virtual assistants, I think that's extremely important. And to me, I'm thinking of robotics. Did some of you get over to MIT, to the MIT Museum yesterday? They had a really interesting display, and you can see that robotics at a personal level is coming on. They're not just making cars anymore. There's a lot of really amazing stuff going on. And the other thing I would kind of throw into the virtual assistant category, even though it may not exactly seem like a fit, are drones. Using those in a educational setting is happening now, but I think it's going to get more and more. So, how accurate have the projections been? Well, pretty darn good, really. And again, if you go back to the very first one, not only did we have 3D printing in there, I remember we were sitting in a room in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were talking about this phenomena that was going on the internet, where people were kind of creating groups and things like that with stuff like Friendster and some early kinds of social media, and we identified social networking as a thing to keep an eye out. I think if you look at 2004, I don't think there's any other publication around that identified 3D printing and social networking as significant trends. So I think our accuracy has been good. I think sometimes the timing hasn't. So in 2004, when you said 3D printing would be here in 5 years in the classroom, well, we didn't hit it right. It's taken a little longer than that. It's definitely in the classroom. It's not ubiquitous, but there's plenty of 3D printing going on all over the place. So I think we've done extremely well on the accuracy of it. This is a chart that's probably not the best contrast on it to look at, but what it's showing you is the 3 different Horizon reports for museums, higher education, and K-12. And you can see that there is definite commonality. BYOD is important in every one of these sectors, no doubt. 3D printing is not as important in the K-12 environment as of 2013. To be honest, I should have updated this to the 2014 K-12 because it's out now, and I think 3D printing moved up. But you know, it's just a way of looking at these things in sort of a collective sense. Now, again, I want to really stress that the Horizon project is what you ought to be thinking about. So one of the things that they developed was the Horizon Project Navigator, and this is it's on the web, and it's a way that you can get into all the kind of back office stuff about the Horizon report. So if you just Google NMC Horizon Project Navigator, that's easier than going to the NMC website and kind of stumbling around in there. So, you know, the idea initially was to create it as a social media platform, but I don't think it necessarily works that way. But I do think it's a great, rich collection of information and a pretty good way to get to it. So, I want to again say that you all can be part of this process. You don't have to be an NMC member school. But you can jump in. So if you're one who does Twitter, for example, and you're finding articles, I spend 2 to 3 hours every day doing research on essentially from news sources, and I'm an official tweeter for the NMC, and I also tweet under at Lawrence G. Miller. And if I find something that I think is specific to the NMC, of course I can tweet it on their side, but I can also tweet it on my side, and I use the hashtag NMCHC. So you can do that too. If you find something and you're tweeting it out, just add that NMCHZ on it, and somebody at the NMC will see it and will incorporate that into you know, our collection of information if it's appropriate. You can also, as I said, sign up for the advisory board, and you can use the gonmc.org address that's here, or you can find it through nmc.org. And again, if you're doing something really cool at your school, please let us know about it. There's actually great value in just telling the NMC you're doing something cool. Now that may wind up in a Horizon project document of some sort, or you may get an invitation to come to the summer conference, or perhaps to do an NMC webinar. The NMC has started doing a webinar series using Google Hangout. And the Google Air version of it lets 4 concurrent people speak, and pretty much unlimited number of people participate. So if you have a project that you know they think is interesting, that might be a format that we can work with you on. So really encourage you to think about joining the NMC also, if you haven't, particularly the community colleges. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I can send you some materials as well. Finally, yeah, did that again. Finally, there is an app that you might want to get. I think it costs a whopping 99 cents. You can get it at the iTunes store if you're on the iOS, or wherever Android people shop, if you're using that. And so what this is, though, is it's sort of like a weekly digest things that are of interest. So you know, it's just this constant stream of good information. You don't have to wait around a year for the next higher ed project to come out in the form of a publication. This stuff is out there all the time. So that is why the future is here, but it's unevenly distributed. And at this point, I would like to encourage you to follow me at Lawrence G. Miller. If you are so inclined to do the Twitter thing, and you can send me an email. I have some cards up here too, but I wanted to leave some time here for some questions. Do we have some questions? Yes. Okay. Well, assuming the FAA doesn't intervene, okay, you can put a camera, a GoPro camera on a drone. If you are an environmental biologist and you are looking at river erosion, you can fly the drone over a river in an area that might otherwise be inaccessible to travel to. I think urban planning is another area where you can, basically the thing that the drone can do is it can take either pictures or video, or it can carry instrumentation. So I know there was one project I read about where they had some type of sensor on it that was doing air samples. And so the drone had a path that was defined so that they could be used in a quantifiable sense for research purposes. Yes?
When you put up the comparison of the K through 12 higher ed and museums, I was surprised to see that electronic publishing was listed under museums, but not education. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't know why it isn't on the other side, and I don't know why museums think it's important, and I think it's important. I think we had a gentleman in the executive session. I think he did a 3-hour thing on e-text, and boy, that really opened my eyes. I mean, we will be e-text sooner than I thought. So yeah, can't speak for the results because I wasn't involved, and even if I was, I would just be one vote. But I found that interesting. Anybody else? Yeah. Tell me what you mean by that. Affected. Well, yeah, I know. You have to read the report to find out the contextual sense for that.
How would you define it?
I'm not sure I can. You really have to look in there and see what they're talking about, because that's a strange term. You know? Yeah.
How widespread does something have to be for you to consider it a not?
Well, it's.
You can find a 3D printing course and maybe not in schools, but does that mean it's not?
Right, and that's the, you know, I mean, this is an effort to bring expert knowledge, expert subject matter knowledge together, and to from each of those groups come up with a document that basically is what that group believes. So what is significant is you know, a perceptual issue that you know, I think how do you know when the New York Times says the 10 best this, or how do you know when U.S. News and World Report says the best party schools? You know, I mean, this is just kind of the process, and these are not necessarily definitive answers as much as they are ways of looking at things that clearly are out there. And obviously, if there are things that, you know, you can look at this and say, why isn't something there? or why is that important or something, but you really need to kind of read the document itself, and it'll tell you why they came to that conclusion. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'll hang around up here for a few moments. If any community college people want the last 2 or 3 of these up here. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great rest of the conference.